Boy, the warning klaxons have been firing for a very long time. You know not to click links in emails, right? I'm not going to get on you for clicking links in emails because you guys are the best and brightest. You know that already. But, man, this new way of doing that is a problem. The goal of the bad guys is to get you to do something against your own self-interest. Really, that's what it is. It's against your own self-interest, right? So what do? They send us emails, the classic Nigerian scam. I designed a system, in fact, to defeat that Nigerian scam all those years ago. But that is kind of our first exposure to it, I think, for most of us. Nowadays, we are getting bombarded left, right, and center. We're getting emails from people. We're getting text messages from people. And ultimately, they're all trying to get hard cash from us, hard money, U.S. currency. That's what they want. They don't want Bitcoin, right? None of that stuff. They can't even buy a pizza with Bitcoin. They want cash. So they've been trying to go after us. That's what phishing's all about, right? You get an email saying, Bank of America, for instance, has sent you an email here, and you look at the email and it says, oh, someone's trying to break into your account. You need to go here right now or call this number and report it. And then, you reach out and they say, okay, well, we need your social security number, your birth date, your name, because we've got to verify it's you. I want to put a little insert here too that let you know this is a little behind the scenes stuff. This is not that secret anymore, so I'm going to tell you guys, okay? And here's what it is. The banks have been not only recording your phone calls, that message saying, hey, we're going to be recording for quality assurance purposes, but they have been analyzing your voice. So that when you call in, have you noticed they try and get you to talk a little bit? This isn't just banks. This is financial institutions of all sorts, investment places. They get you to talk a little bit, and the computer analyzes your voice and says, based on the voice print, this is Craig Peterson. That's the guy. And off you go, right? You've been verified without having to give a code, the last 4 digits or 5 digits of whatever, blah, blah, blah. So they are analyzing it, and so is our friends at Amazon with your Alexa, so is Google, so is Apple. They're all analyzing it. And it's been Amazon that's been asking me, hey, do you want me to call you by name? I always say no. It's just creepy, right? It's just creepy. So they're trying to find out what they can about you, the bad guys, to get you to do something against your own best interests. And what we're talking about right now is a newer way that they've been doing it. If you go to a website, like I'm on a website right now. If you have the newsletter from this week, you'll see the article I'm talking about from Bleeping Computer. And over on the right-hand column, there are a bunch of ads. So right now, there's an ad for CBS Sports. And MSI, this is one of their stories, accidentally breaks secure boot for hundreds of motherboards. So that's one of their house ads. Microsoft script recreate shortcuts deleted by bad defender ASR rule. Okay, so that's one of their own articles. And then Adobe Acrobat. Acrobat's got it. Go to market plan. Ooh, how exciting. That is a paid ad. And up in the upper right-hand side, I can see right there, I can hit the X saying, I don't like this ad, and it'll ask me what's going on. Now, this is by a company called DoubleClick. DoubleClick places ads on websites all over the world. And if you click on the ad, typically, the advertiser pays, in this case, DoubleClick. And then DoubleClick gives a percentage of that to the people maintaining the websites. So that is how a lot of people go ahead and maintain the income necessary in order to have the website, in order to create content. Now, you might have noticed on CraigPeterson.com, I don't do that because I'm a fool, right? Yeah. But at any rate, that's what they're doing, these ads. So DoubleClick has been out there. They're probably one of the oldest in what they call internet advertising companies that's been out there for quite a while, frankly. But Google bought DoubleClick for $3.1 billion back in 2008. So real money. That's telling us who owns it. Google owns DoubleClick. And we know Google makes its money by gathering information about you and by selling your information to advertisers and others, including the police, a federal government, basically anybody that'll pony up the cash. They'll tell all about you. That's a problem in and of itself. But the problem that now Google is having that they really haven't had too much of before is that malware operators have been abusing this Google Ads platform in order to spread malware. They're sending it to these unsuspecting users who are searching for popular software products. So let's say that you are out there looking to buy Grammarly. I use Grammarly all the time. I recommend it. I know a lot of people that use it. It's fantastic. It is great at fixing your grammar, spelling, and punctuation. It is really, really good. I would warn against using the Grammarly keyboard on your iOS device because all of that data is getting sent up to Grammarly. I don't know that I want to have them have it. Anyways, so what they've done is they put an ad up pretending they're Grammarly, MSI Afterburner, Slack, Dashlane, Malwarebytes, Audacity, OBS, Ring, AnyDesk, LibreOffice, which is, by the way, if you don't want to pay the Microsoft tax for Microsoft Word, LibreOffice is a decent replacement. TeamViewer, Thunderbird, Brave, all kinds of free software and paid software. So you see the ad and you say, oh, wow, okay, let me check on that. And you click it. Now, normally when you're clicking an ad, you expect it to go to that company, right? So if you were to click on an ad for Grammarly, let's say, and you ended up on a different website, immediately your own internal klaxons would be going off, wouldn't they? Saying, oh, wait a minute here, that's not right. I was trying to go to Grammarly. However, what is actually happening is they clone the websites. So that cloned website now is right behind that ad. So click the ad, it takes you to the cloned website, and once you're there at that cloned website, you're going to download what you think is Grammarly or Slack or whatever it might be, and you're going to get malware. So this is a very big problem because it's Google Ads. They're everywhere. And there's reports out from Guardio Labs and Trend Micro that are talking about these malicious websites and how they've been promoting themselves to a much larger audience via Google ad campaigns. As I mentioned, there are a lot of these advertising networks. Most of them are not owned by Google. And in the past, they have had problems with this very thing, where bad guys were using them in order to send malware out there. Not something you want to do, right? So now Google has really kind of pushed up their socks here, pulled them up, and they are now doing a few different things. So first of all, on Google search, it's promoting different web pages, right? Placing them higher in the list of results as advertisements. Many times, by the way, above the official website of the project itself. So people who are looking for legitimate software on a browser without an active ad blocker, you can put these on. Some websites won't let you use them if you're blocking the ads, but you can block ads, and we've done training on that before. We're probably going to do a Wednesday Wisdom about that. That's a Wednesday Wisdom is a whole new thing that we're going to be doing on, guess which day? On Wednesday. And I'm just going to do like a half hour deeper dive into some of these topics so that you understand what's going on, okay? And they're absolutely free, just like my weekly newsletter at craigpeterson.com/subscribe. But if Google detects that the landing site's malicious, the campaign's blocked, the ads are removed. So the bad guys have to use a trick in that step to bypass Google's automated checks. So apparently the trick is to take the victims clicking on the ad to an irrelevant but benign site created by the threat actor and then redirect them to a malicious site impersonating the software project. So you've probably seen that before, even in my emails that come out. If you click on a link in one of my weekly Insider Note emails, you'll notice that aha, wait a minute here, something just happened, because it'll bounce through another website before it actually gets to the site you want to go to. And the reason it does that is I want to know if people are opening those links, which links they're opening, which is going to tell me what I should talk more about, so you guys get stuff that's relevant to you. In this case, that's not what they're doing. So I'm looking again on Bleeping Computer on this article I shared with you, and it's showing the Masquerade site. That's kind of a cute term, isn't it? Masquerade. And then it's showing you what the hidden phishing site is. So, for instance, America First. This is a credit union. That's the Masquerade site. The hidden phishing site is arnocafirst.xyz, okay, et cetera, et cetera. So I hate to say it now, but not only do you have to keep up your guards when you're looking to maybe click on a link, keep up your guard when you're trying to look at a text message and deciding if you're going to respond to it. And ultimately, you have to now keep an eye on the ads. Are those ads legitimate? And frankly, what you might want to do, and this is unfortunate because you're now not supporting the website that the ad was on that needs the money, right? But unfortunately, what you should probably do is just go up to your menu bar or maybe go to a search engine and find the company yourself without clicking on the ads. Isn't that sad? Google's going to fix this. I'm sure it'll be fixed for the most part anyways. It's interesting to see this type of arrest happen, and it's kind of reminding me of London, England, and some other places in the world where you have no right to privacy, but they caught the bad guy. So where should this line be? Nowadays it really seems like an obvious thing to do, and Schneider.com has a great little article on this. It was also in my newsletter. But should you be able to just go out and track people? Right? The search is probably unconstitutional, frankly, what they're doing out there. And part of the reason we know that's true is we've got judges who have ruled that these blanket cell phone tracking orders from the police and requests from the police and even from the courts is unconstitutional. That was a federal judge who shot it down in March of 2022. This is a widely used police tactic. Now, in London, they have cameras everywhere and throughout the UK. And the police will look around and try and find out, okay, who was here, who was there, what happened, who might be a suspect. In our big cities in the U.S., they have some technology that lets them track a gunshot sound. So a gun fires, they know pretty much exactly where the gun discharged, and they send the police there right away. Well, police departments are sometimes using cell phone data to find out who was in the vicinity of a crime. And what they're trying to do, just like in London, is locate possible suspects. With what's called a geofence warrant, where they're able to say, I want to know any smartphone, cell phones. Nowadays, it's any cell phone. By federal law, they have to have GPS in them that was in a specific area. Now, it's easier in some cases where they can buy, anybody can buy. You can go out and buy location data of smartphones because people are using free apps. They're using Google Maps. They're using Waze, which used to be great but got bought by Google. Therefore, that information about them, where they are, how fast they were going, etc., is easily available to anybody. No warrant needed. Right? Sounds like a little bit of a problem. But with one of these geofence warrants where they say, hey, tell me any devices that were within this area, the police can find out how many cell phones were near the crime and who those cell phones belong to. Sound familiar? You might remember that the whole January 6th thing a couple of years back. So the ability to issue these geofence warrants has proven to be very effective. You've got critics accusing police of violating the Fourth Amendment, since the warrant does not target a single individual and does not go after something specific that person might have, securing your papers, right? But it is scooping up all the location data of everyone in a certain area. And sometimes that area is very broad. It isn't like just this one block, but even in one block, there could be hundreds of devices. And the majority of people whose information is provided to the police are completely innocent of whatever crime the police might be investigating at the time. So the Fourth Amendment protects against unreasonable search and seizure. Should that protection extend to a person's phone? Well, Judge M. Hanna Lauck, L-A-U-C-K, of the U.S. District Court for the Eastern District of Virginia, agreed with some of these people who thought this was a really bad idea and ruled the practice unconstitutional. So this ruling is a major win for privacy advocates, and we'll see here what ends up happening. There's always appeals, right? And different courts seem to have different opinions. Turns out, I guess the law isn't the law, and the Constitution is a living document. It means what I say it means. I don't care what it says, right? We've all heard those arguments before. But they had a search that occurred. Why did they do this? Well, these two guys, Greenwood and Crahan, were arrested almost immediately after attacks on two substations, power substations out in Washington state. They were arrested. Well, the interesting part of this is that the police who were investigating the crime used geofence warrants. So what they did is they said, okay, during this time period, which phones were by power station A and which phones were by power station B. And then they did the good old Venn diagram, right? And where was the intersection of the two? Well, and there were two other power stations. So 4 total, according to the court documents, that these guys visited. Well, that narrows it down quite a bit, because having all 4 power stations with the same 2 people, guess what? They were arrested almost immediately. Okay, not too hard to do. And you want the criminals to be found, and we're finding them now all of the time, with DNA, et cetera, right? So it's an interesting problem here that isn't quite resolved yet when it comes to our Constitution. Obviously, in the UK, they don't have the same rights that we had here in the U.S. So there was a document in the Snowden archive. Now, remember way back when Edward Snowden had released a whole bunch of information about what the government was doing illegally. I know the government never does anything illegally. Never, ever, nothing, ever. You have to trust them, right? Because they don't ever frame anyone. They don't ever, that stuff never happens. So here's what our friend Schneider had to say, Bruce Schneider. The second application suggested is to identify a particular person whom you know visited a particular geographical area on a series of dates and times. Again, this is from Snowden. And the example in this presentation is a kidnapper. He's based in a rural area, so he can't risk making his ransom calls from that area. So he drives to an urban area to make the calls using either what you might call a burner phone or a pay phone, if you can find those nowadays. So he can't be identified that way. But if you assume he has some sort of a smartphone in his pocket that identifies itself over the internet, you might be able to find him in that data set. Of course, you can also find it even if their phone isn't connected to the internet by looking at some of the switching logs from the cell towers. So he might be the only ID that appears in that geographical location around the same time as the ransom calls and at no other time. So there's a lot of surveillance that you can do if you can follow everyone, everywhere, all of the time. Remember what they said in the Soviet Union, the head of the KGB, show me the man, I'll show you the crime. I've read a book that says by the time you're out of bed in the morning, you've probably broken 3 federal laws. There's over 20,000 gun laws on the books. How can you possibly not commit a crime? Of some sort, right? Whether it's a traffic violation all the way up. I'm not talking about things like murder, etc. But, heaven forbid that you remove that little tab there on the pillow and you sell that pillow later on, okay? You've committed a federal crime. Could be a felony. So being able to track everyone, everywhere, all of the time opens up the door wide for some substantial abuse, okay? And I wouldn't even think about turning your phone off, right, if you don't want to be tracked, because now your phone was off. Obviously, you must be trying to hide something, right? Yeah, okay. So how many people turned off their phones at the exact times of the Washington Power Station attacks? Probably a small enough number to investigate them all. So again, we've got to rein this in. The government overreach is there. We do want to stop crime, especially serious crime. But again, at what cost, right? Remember redcoats marching into people's homes. They don't even have to come in your home anymore. We had a good case come out of the Supreme Court here recently, and it's a lawsuit, and they are allowing a certain suit to go ahead, and it has everything to do with your privacy. Good job here. Good article that I shared this week in my newsletter. You can sign up for free at craigpeterson.com/subscribe. Well, this is an info security magazine. Again, you'll see it right there in the email. But the U.S. Supreme Court gave the green light for WhatsApp to pursue a lawsuit against NSO Group. You might have heard of them. I've talked about them before. This is an Israeli surveillance company, well known for hacking into people's iPhones and Android devices and others. This is how Khashoggi apparently was tracked and was killed by a foreign government. It's incredible what these people have doing. They've got this spyware called Pegasus. And the suit that went in front of the Supreme Court was because it's alleged again that the NSO Group installed the Pegasus spyware on roughly 1,400 devices where WhatsApp was also installed. For those that don't know, WhatsApp is an instant messaging program where you can send messages directly to people or to groups of people. You can have discussions. You can make phone calls. You can go all in. It's really kind of a cool piece of software. WhatsApp, unfortunately, is owned by Facebook, which means right off the bat, you can't trust Meta. You can't trust Facebook. So I would say as a general rule, don't use WhatsApp. But WhatsApp does use some of the encryption code that was put together by a group called Signal. And that's Moxie Marlinspike is the guy that actually wrote it. What do you want to bet he had changed his name from something normal to Marlinspike? Yeah, okay. Well, if you are a sailor, you know what a Marlinspike is. But here's what's going on. The court ruled that WhatsApp is allowed to sue our friends over at NSO Group for damages because of the malicious installation of the spyware. Now, did our friends over at NSO Group install it themselves? Or were they just the company that wrote the spyware? We know that they've got that spyware and they sell it to police department and governments, etc. In fact, a lot of the governments that buy it are repressive governments. And as I mentioned with, I think it's just Khashoggi, right? They kill. Some of these governments kill people when they find out that they're doing something or track them, and they use some of this software allegedly from this NSO Group. So it's very interesting to see here. So this is a substantial victory for Facebook / Meta / WhatsApp, because remember, they're owned by our friends over there at Meta, formerly known as Facebook. And they have tried unsuccessfully to challenge NSO Group's alleged activities in the past. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Because what is NSO Group? Is it just a company that sells software? Does it have some sort of special rights or protections because the Israeli government allows it to exist, and not only allows it to exist, but apparently helps it in a number of different ways? So the WhatsApp spokesperson said NSO spyware has enabled cyber attacks targeting human rights activists, journalists, and government officials. We firmly believe that their operations violate U.S. law and they must be held to account for their unlawful operations. It is shocking what NSO Group is alleged to have done here and in many other cases. It's very concerning, because if these types of companies can go ahead and put malware on your device, an iPhone, an Android, a Windows, whatever it might be, how far are they going to go? Again, it goes back to how much surveillance should they have? How much of the geofencing should the government just be able to blanket do? Hey, give me everybody that was in this area around this time. Because they're going to be pulling up in that big net that they've cast a lot of innocent people. Well, how about stuff like this? How about encryption? We know also when it comes to encryption that there were a few problems with the government ordering devices to be unlocked. Remember what happened? Again, a shooter down in San Bernardino killed some fellow office workers, and they were able to get an iPhone, and they couldn't get into it because it didn't have the passcode on it. And so they went probably to the NSO Group, from all of the reports that I've read, and had them provide the software in order to break into the iPhone. So Apple has been a lot better here now with some of their security, and is trying to make it so that it's almost impossible to break into. Because remember, too, it isn't that the government can't get into it, or we don't necessarily want to block government from getting into it. We want to keep bad guys out of it. So how do you keep the bad guys out of it? Right? If there is a back door to get in, anybody could potentially get in, right? So if you put a back door in for the government to get onto, and everything's all well and good because we've got the government right there able to hop on. They can get in. There's a back door. And man, has this argument been going on for a very long time. But the government's got a back door, and they can and they do and they will get onto that computer. What's going to stop a bad guy from doing that exact same thing and breaking in? Right? Really, nothing. There's nothing that's going to stop that bad guy from doing it. Because if they can steal whatever, why can't they steal passwords? Because they're doing that all of the time. They're breaking into federal government systems. They're breaking into private systems. We just had Experian with yet another break-in. Well, this was a little bit different. It was a hack. But anyways, how far should it go? How far can it go? So the NSO Group has denied any involvement in human rights abuses. They've denied that they are doing anything that's illegal, that the products are designed to help law enforcement agencies fight crime, to fight terrorism. They've also asked to be recognized as a foreign government agent. That's what I was referring to a little bit earlier, because if they are a foreign government agent, in this case the government of Israel, they are entitled to immunity under U.S. law that limits lawsuits against foreign countries. Interesting, isn't it? So here's a quote here: done under contract with a government, this could be seen purely as an outsourced software development relationship. However, actively operating the tools is akin to simultaneously operating private military contractors. Trying to leverage the agent of a government isn't likely to give any legal cover if that government has not taken accountability for the actions done on their behalf. Think of mercenaries. That's really what we're talking about here. Potential mercenaries. So what should they do? Well, case in point, the NSO group has been blacklisted by the U.S. Department of Commerce. So it has limited the access of this Israeli company that develops spyware, more than allegedly, I think, but they can't get at U.S. technology. They are barred, which I think is a very, very good thing. So a lot of interesting stuff this week on your privacy, what you can do, what you should do, where we should be going as you move forward. And I like the fact that the Supreme Court's letting this case go ahead. And we'll see ultimately what happens. There's going to be a lot of stuff going on over the next couple of years. Make sure you visit me online, craigpeterson.com, and get my free newsletter, Insider Show Notes, every Monday. Well, Experian is in the news again. You might remember they had a huge hack and people's personal information was stolen. Your information was stolen. That's what the bad guys are using for phishing, along with other things. Well, they're in again. Experian is one of those big companies that's out there, with this holier-than-thou attitude and deciding what your credit rating should be. And your credit rating isn't just for credit cards to determine whether or not you should get a 15% rate or a 25% rate. It is used to figure out how much they should charge you for insurance. Your automobile insurance, your home insurance, because, someone with a low credit rating, they're not a good risk when it comes to insurance, right? They use it everywhere. So these people at these credit bureaus have all kinds of financial information about us, and they have not been doing that great a job at protecting us. Another article this week from Krebs on Security in the newsletter. This is about identity thieves bypassing the Experian security to get at your credit report. So this is a little different than breaking in and downloading massive databases. What they found is they could go to the annualcreditreport.com, which allows you to get one free credit report every year with all of the information about you and where you're spending money and what your balances are, what the credit cards are. And if you've ever done that, it'll ask you some questions. So because they know so much about you, they're going to absolutely fake you out and give you questions like, select which of these addresses you've lived at before. Who has been an employer of yours before? Those types of questions. Do you own a 2023 Mercedes-Benz? And obviously I don't, so I don't hit that box. But that's the whole idea, right? Who's lived at that address? What other addresses have you had in the past? And that's how it kind of verifies it's you. You put in some basic information, then it looks in its databases, and it tries to stump the chump by giving you a bunch of options to select, some of which are valid and some of which are not valid. Well, it turns out that you could go to Experian's website and bypass all of those questions and go straight to the consumer's report itself. So all you needed was a person's name, address, birthday, and social security number. And because these guys have been hacked before, these credit bureaus, as well as other sites out there, dentists, doctors, hospitals, they have all of that information. So they were able to happily go in, find out more about you, find out how much money you made, at least what's reported, and what your credit history is, what your credit score is, and say, oh, okay, this is a great guy. We're going to steal money from him. We're going to try and steal his house, a quick claim deed. We're going to buy a couple of cars in her name, right? All of that sort of stuff. Absolutely amazing. Well, in December, there's a lady, I assume there's a lady, Jenya Kushnir, who is a security researcher living in Ukraine. By the way, it's surprising how many legitimate cybersecurity people there have been in Ukraine, even in Russia. But, it is a guy who said he discovered the method being used by identity thieves after he spent some time on Telegram chat channels that are dedicated to cashing out a compromised identity that, hey, this is what is going on. Here's a quote that went to Krebs on Security. I want to try and help to put a stop to it and to make it difficult for ID thieves to access, since Experian is not doing beep and regular people are struggling. If somehow I can make a small change and help to improve this inside myself, I can feel that I did something that actually matters and helped others. I'm kind of correcting grammar as I go. I can't avoid doing that, so sorry about that. So apparently they learned that they could trick Experian into giving them access to anyone's credit report. All they had to do was edit the address bar, right? So up at the top, if you're on a website, you see a little bar, right? You can click on that. Oftentimes it'll have your email address in there, might have some other stuff about your particular session. But they were able to go in and modify that address bar. Easy peasy. I could show anyone how to do it in about 10 seconds, quite literally 10 seconds. And if you did it at the right point in this identity verification process, bam, you are in. Isn't that something? So if you haven't seen your credit report for a while, check it out, annualcreditreport.com. They will let you pick your credit report. You get to pick which agency you want. But I found nowadays most of the credit card companies will give you access to your credit information, your score, all for free, and will let you dig into it a little bit more if you need to. But this is absolutely incredible. So the person who wrote this article, and I don't see a name, so it must be Brian Krebs, went in and had a look. He did it himself. All he had to do was change the page's trailing URL from /ACR/OCW error to simply /ACR/report. And there he goes. He had his entire credit file. He says he's so dumbfounded by Experian's incompetence that I asked a close friend and trusted security source to try the method on her identity file Experian. Sure enough, when she got to the part where Experian asked questions, changing the last part of the URL in her address bypassed the questions and immediately displayed her full credit report. And as usual, her report was also replete with errors. I have found that to be such the case probably 10, 15 years ago, back when they really started having a market, I guess is what you'd say, for these data broker services. I approached a couple, I interviewed a few data brokers, and in each case I had them give access to the information they had on me. And I would say at least half of it, 2/3 of it was incorrect. I mean, totally wrong, because they're kind of trying to draw conclusions from impartial or incomplete, I should say, information. So what are you going to do? It's really easy to have this defeated attitude when it comes to credit bureaus. They've been fouling things up royally, and they've been fouling up for consumers. Remember, we are not the credit bureau's customers, right? You're not paying the credit bureau for information, but credit card companies are, businesses are, insurance companies are. And even those of us who are diligent about watching the consumer credit files and disputing inaccuracies are going to get kind of worn out by these people, okay? So here's the steps that you should keep in mind from Krebs on Security, and I agree with him on this. The first one is awareness. Find out what these companies are saying about you behind your back. Again, annualcreditreport.com. So that's the first step. It's awareness. keep that, whether it's fair or not, your credit score as determined by these bureaus, and there's 3 big ones, can affect you for anything. You want to rent an apartment, you want a job, you want a loan, you want insurance, it's going to affect you. So in that context, these small unintentional errors unrelated to identity theft can really nail you when it comes to things that you might want to do or need to do down the road. So each one of these bureaus is required to provide a free copy of your credit report every year. And again, annualcreditreport.com. Okay, hopefully you've got that written down or you've gone there already. So some consumers report the site never works for them. I've used it. It does work for me. And each bureau will insist they don't have enough information to provide a report. A financial institution like your bank may be able to give you information, let you view your credit file through them. You're going to have to look around a little bit, okay? But when you get your report, look through it. Look for anything that isn't yours, anything that's not true. Then document and file a dispute with the corresponding credit bureau. Because remember, they're all going to have different information. They are all going to have drawn different conclusions about you. So this includes Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. Those are the big ones, all right? Also, it's good to know that it is free nowadays for everyone in all 50 U.S. states to place a security freeze on your credit files. So you can also do this for your partner, for your dependents. And freezing your credit means that no one who doesn't already have a financial relationship with you can view your credit file. So it makes it unlikely that potential creditors are going to grant you new lines of credit in your name to identity thieves, right? That's what you want. So freezing your credit file also means that these credit bureaus can no longer sell peeks at your credit history to others. It's probably a good idea to do that. So anytime you wish to apply for new credit or new job or open an account at a utility, at a rent for an apartment or for a new cell phone, you can thaw the freeze on your credit file and set it to freeze automatically again after a few days. Okay? So don't confuse a credit freeze, also known as a security freeze, with the alternative that bureaus will steer you towards, which is credit lock services. And you've heard some of the ads on the air and on websites as you're going around the internet for these credit lock services that say, oh, we monitor your credit. If it's ever stolen, we'll help you recover it. Yeah, they'll help. Barely. All the information they provide that I've seen that listeners have shared with me when they used one of these services, all of that information was available for free just by searching for it online. Okay? So the bureaus are really pitching these credit lock services. What you want is a credit freeze or security freeze. And these services, they say, oh, it makes it really easy for you to turn your credit on and off, okay? Ignore the lock services. Just freeze your credit files, okay? Important to know. There's also these knowledge-based authentications. In other words, something that you should know that other people wouldn't know. Remember, they fail us all of the time. It is a problem, these credit, organized theft groups, etc. So keep an eye out. They are coming after you. They are going after your money. They love U.S. dollars. Make sure you get my insider show notes, craigpeterson.com/subscribe. It's all free. The Internet of Things is a real problem for a lot of us, and we're using it for things like our security cameras, our thermostats on the walls. We're hooking our TVs up to it so we can stream video. What are the things you need to do before you get that security camera? These devices that we're adding to our networks are actually computers. You consider what's in one of these security cameras or that wonderful little Google Nest thermostat that you have on the wall. Both of those have computing power that exceeds what put men on the moon. Well, at least the computer that was on board. They've got gigabytes of storage on them, without a doubt. And maybe they have megabytes, still bigger than what was on the Apollo 11 spacecraft. And they're running an operating system. Now, Apollo 11 had the advantage of not being hooked up to a network because they didn't really exist back then, right? 1969, not so much. There were certainly some networks around, but nobody was attacking them. I can remember in the early days when I was starting to use the ARPANET and, the internet as it's called today. And I was just shocked when somebody decided they would release a worm, the Morris worm, and it crawled through email servers all over the internet. It was absolutely ridiculous. So there you go. A security researcher proving that there were holes in the cybersecurity because we trusted each other. And if you get right down to the protocols that we're running today, the TCP protocols, the email protocols known as SMTP or IMAP or POP, and now there's some other ones out there, but SMTP particularly, they actually speak English to each other, these computers. They say hello, or they kind of mess the letters around a little bit too for the more advanced stuff, but they say hello to each other. They tell you when there's text coming, etc. It's because it was designed for people to be able to debug, people to be able to implement. And even though it took some more bytes, some more data stream to send HELO as opposed to sending maybe 1 or 2 bytes, and those bytes represented some sort of a character that would then be used, or some sort of a value then be used to figure out what needed to happen there, they decided, let's be friendly. And that's what it was all about. We used to have so much fun back in the 80s, particularly the early 80s, messing around online, sending fun stuff back and forth, right? Nowadays, I might call it memes and things. And kids think they created those, but no, they've been around for a very long time, even before the networks were really all hooked up together. But we have a problem today because many people kind of have the same philosophy. Early internet, it was, we're all working together, we're all doing this together, and we kind of self-policed, and bad guys stayed off of it. It was pretty complicated, and there weren't too many bad guys trying to get on. Fast forward, we started having computers that were accessible via dial-up modem. I remember how excited I was when we went from 110 baud to 300 baud, right? 110 bits per second. You could watch the characters come up one at a time on the screen, or in my case, on a teletype, TTY 33s. And today, of course, we're talking about gigabits. I've got gigabits coming into my office, multiple gigabits over a fiber link. So different, isn't it? So if I have a computer that is exposed on my network, am I going to get hacked? That's the big question, right? Well, if you're hooking your computer directly up to the internet and you don't have a firewall that's doing NATing, which is a network address translation, if you don't have that firewall there, then yeah, you're going to get scanned. Believe me, you're going to get scanned multiple times per hour, sometimes multiple times per minute, as they try and figure out who are you, what are you, what kind of a device is this, have you changed the username, the password, etc. And of course, they're going to find out in most cases that you haven't. But the reality is the only device you have that's facing the internet, that's directly accessible from the internet, typically, is your firewall. So step 1, make sure that firewall has a new password and a new account. Change it from admin, right, where the username is admin and the password is admin, to something unique. Most of these firewalls, you can change your username. You can definitely change your password. And that makes it harder for people to break in. Now, of course, there can be bugs in that firewall software. We've seen that again and again and again, so that the bad guys can exploit a bug, often what's called a buffer overrun, but expose a bug, and then use that bug to now take over your firewall. And man, have we seen that before, where they're redirecting you using DNS from your firewall and just doing all kinds of nasty things to you. It's a bad thing to see. So you're thinking, okay, so I've got that firewall. I changed my username on the firewall. I changed the password. I bought the firewall. And you know what? I am constantly watching for patches coming out. I've got my CVE table. I check it every day. I go online and I check, right? Of course, well, you don't, but let's say you did. Here's the other side of that problem. Your security cameras are not hooked up directly to the internet, correct? You're hooking them up to your local area network. It might be your Wi-Fi that's there in your small business or your house. Okay. How can you watch the video? Can you watch the video from your iPhone, or your Android device, whatever it might be, your smartphone? Can you watch it when you're out of the business, when you are at home? Or if you're at home and you've got them hooked up at home, can you watch the video when you're on the road? I bet the answer is yes. Well, how can you do that? You see, if that firewall is protecting everything on your network from the mean, nasty, cruel world that's out there, how can you get through that firewall to your security cameras? Well, there's a couple of typical ways. Some of these security cameras want you to go in and make a configuration change on your firewall so that if they connect to it, in other words, if you connect to it using your phone to connect to your firewall at the house, it will then pass that data on through to your camera. There's a UPnP protocol which you don't want to use, but everybody does, and it's turned on your firewall. So now you are getting through your firewall, and your firewall is typically directing all of that traffic directly to your camera. So now the bad guys can not only try and hack your firewall, but they can try and hack your camera. You see how this works? If you can get to your camera from outside your network, there's two ways. I just explained the first way, which is you've made a change to your firewall, or in some cases, the camera might have requested a change to your firewall. So the second way, you're asking, what's that second way, Craig? Well, that camera may be poking a hole out of your firewall. Okay, well, heck, that's what you're doing when you're web browsing, right? You're making a little hole. You're getting out to the internet, and the internet is sending you data back, correct? Right? When you go to craigpeterson.com, craigpeterson.com server sends you back everything for the homepage, correct? So you've got a request going out through your firewall, and you've got a request coming back, the answer coming back in from your firewall, from the internet. So there is a way out and back in. So that camera may be connecting to a server out on the internet through your firewall, and now it is creating what you might call a virtual private network. So the camera is now streaming your video, whether it's a Ring camera or one of these Hikvision cameras. It's streaming your video through your firewall to the internet, and in many cases is also providing access from the internet, particularly from that cloud server, to your camera. Well, if that's happening and your camera gets hacked somehow, something happens to your camera, then what? Well, if they can hack your camera, if they can hack the website that your camera is talking to, they are in. And we've seen that before. I've seen small businesses that have bought these security cameras, the Hikvision, which you should not be buying, and they set it up so it's pointing at the cash register. So you can see if the employees are giving themselves a few extra tips on the side. Or you might be using it for the baby monitor. All of this stuff gets sent out to the internet using method number 2. And your security camera, your wonderful little thermostat, and Google got caught with putting a microphone hidden secretly inside your thermostat. Yeah, that Google thermostat that you have. They didn't tell anybody there was a microphone in there. They eventually enabled it. They wanted you to be able to talk to it and give it commands, apparently is what they were doing. But, if it gets hacked, you've got a microphone there. Same thing with your Alexa, although Amazon was very upfront about, hey, yeah, of course they have microphones. You're going to talk to them, give them commands. And they've done a pretty good job of security, I will say. But a company that's been making security cameras for 50 years may not be a company that knows much about the cyber security side. Are your cameras getting patches? Are they configured properly? Did you change the username and password on your cameras for the network? So the very first question you really need to ask yourself is, do I actually need a security camera? And what's the pedigree of the company? What kind of risks do I have by putting this in? We use Cisco security cameras, and we're pretty comfortable with them. They get updates frequently, and I am storing all of the video locally. Hey, visit me online, craigpeterson.com. Make sure you sign up for my free weekly newsletter and get this article and a whole lot more. We've talked about this so-called green energy, the woke movement and how they're going to be absolutely wonderfully green. Well, it turns out that it is a nightmare, and frankly, it is anything but green. There's a great article that was in my newsletter that came out on Monday, and it's from WhatsApp, W-A-T-T-S, whatsappwiththat.com. Kind of a cool website. It's had half a billion hits. Oh, I hate those off by 1,000 problems. Well, this is just incredible because they are breaking down what is actually needed in order for us to be able to move into what the left is calling green energy. In reality, when we're talking about green energy, what we're talking about is moving the pollution from my backyard, where I'm driving my wonderful electric car. I'm plugging it in at night. Moving the pollution from your backyard to other people's backyards. People who cannot afford it. People who are poor, who are far below even subsistence levels in some of these countries. So he goes through this very, very carefully here in this article. Again, it's in Monday's newsletter. If you missed that, just email me, emmy@craigpeterson.com. Let me know what you're looking for, and I will be happy to send it out for you. Well, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer, you might remember, he made a deal with Senator Manchin. They had the 50-50 Senate trying to enact this spending extravaganza called the Inflation Reduction Act. And what it is primarily is a massive spending bill on what they're calling climate and green energy subsidy. So it's giving Senator Schumer's allies some $370 billion. Your dollars, my dollars. And I don't care if you don't pay a penny in tax, because what happens when they're spending money like this, $370 billion, yet another, right? Who cares? $370 billion is it increases inflation, and inflation is a hidden tax. I just saw some numbers that came out, and they were showing that your buying power has dropped by 3%, and prices have gone up about 8% in the last year. So you're looking at that $100 bill you could have spent last year is now worth about $90. And we're not even going to talk about how they changed the way they compute the numbers to make us look like, oh, it's only the worst in 40 years. Okay. In reality, the inflation is the worst ever. So it doesn't matter. Don't pay a dime in taxes. You're still paying because of inflation. If nothing else, inflation is the hidden tax that the government uses in order to decrease the actual current value of the debt. Economics, right? Ask AOC, she'll know. She's got a degree in economics from Boston College, I think it was. Anyways, so Manchin voted yay on that, because Schumer had agreed to, okay, we'll get your bill here in front of the Senate and we'll make this all move. Because, of course, Manchin's from a state that has a lot of coal production. I think they have some oil there too, right? So it didn't go anywhere. his bill, Manchin's bill, right? Oh, Schumer's passed, right? What the heck? It's only $370 billion in wind, solar, battery, and other funding. But bottom line here, it's a good thing that Manchin's didn't pass, because there's all kinds of other things in there. We're not getting into that right now. But the Wall Street Journal and energy analyst Robert Bryce observed that Manchin's reforms would give the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission and other bureaucrats the power to issue permits for states to acquiesce to new transmission lines, 200-foot tall towers across scenic habitat, agricultural, even residential lands. If a business even asks for an extension of a power grid because they've got a few windmills. Think of that, right? Windmills in the middle of nowhere, they are obliged to put that into the grid. It's just crazy. So in that case, the feds could be decreeing thousands of miles of new transmission lines in the national interest, right? So absolutely amazing. So anyways, the Biden administration is looking to stop man-made climate change, which, by the way, is minimal. Absolutely minimal. The climate change is the only constant the Earth has had since it was, millions, billions of years ago, right? It's always been changing. You remember something about an ice age and a mini ice age just a few hundred years ago? Remember in the 70s, I think it was Time magazine had that front page story about how we're entering an ice age. We have to start spreading black oil up there in the Arctic and the Antarctic to absorb more heat from the sun, and that's going to solve us all. Science, people, science. Thank goodness we didn't do something quite that stupid. So let's look at FERC here, that wonderful federal agency, and let's have a look at our friends in New York State, right? So New York's peak summertime needs, we're talking about here, New York, just New York alone, would require 2,500 680-foot tall, 12-megawatt offshore turbines operating 24/7. Now, in reality, we'd be lucky if they generate electricity 40% of the year, okay? And of course, we know NIMBY, right? Not in my backyard. You can't possibly put windmills off the Cape and islands, right? No, you can't do that. But they'll be glad to put them in front of your house. Don't worry about that one, right? This just drives me absolutely crazy. So the feds would be able to ride roughshod over states, your local communities, the whole concept of federalism that was part of course, the founding, Jeffersonian, right? Wind and sunshine are free. Wind and sunshine are absolutely green. They're renewable, although I don't think that's quite the right word. And they're obviously sustainable. But harnessing becomes the wonderful wind and sunshine becomes unreliable. It's weather-dependent energy, and it's not something we can count on to power civilization. Now, we know that. Okay, we've known that for a long time. So let's take a look at New York a little bit more, okay? Those 2,500 wind turbines for New York electricity generating 30,000 megawatts. That's a lot of power, but that's what they need. And of course, 60% of the year, they wouldn't have any electricity. Who needs it, right? Especially in the winter, you don't need electricity, right? But anyways, it would require nearly 110,000 tons of copper. Now, that means mining, crushing, processing, refining 25 million tons of copper ore. And that's only going to happen after removing 40 million tons of overlying rock to reach the ore bodies. And we're just talking about the copper. Think about this. All of those diesel trucks, all those diggers, all of that blasting, all of the overburden that has to be moved and then put back. Remember how much we're talking about here? 40 million tons of overburden? How about the processing plants, the factories? How many would we need? How much fossil fuel power to run all of those operations? How many thousands of square miles of toxic waste pits all over the world under zero to minimal environmental standards. Right? Because we're not going to do it here. Not in my backyard. It's green because look at my car. I don't see anything come out of the tailpipe. How about the workplace safety standards, slave labor rules? They don't have them in the places that we're getting some of these raw materials. Oh, and how would all of this survive hurricanes like Ian or Andrew? They wouldn't. Craziness. Stick around. We're going to pick up on a couple of more of those green energy things. I wasn't able to finish it just a minute ago, but there is some crazy stuff going on. Plus, we're going to get into some spooky stuff here. What's the CIA been up to? You might remember a couple of weeks ago, I was talking about the problem California's having right now with solar panels. They really pushed these 20 years ago. They provided a whole bunch of funding, everything else for them, and a lot of people put these up on their roofs. They're talking about, California, millions of people. Well, what did we say? Well, they're coming down now. And they're coming down off the roofs because their life cycle is over. So what's happening with them? Well, it's illegal to recycle all of those solar panels in California. You can't recycle them there. So they're sending them out of state to be recycled. And not all of those are getting recycled either. These things are going into storage. And at least 10% of them are going into the landfills. Remember, solar panels are not green. They contain heavy metals that will contaminate the water supply. But they're ending up in the trash. What about all of the rest of the green energy trash? Where's that going to end up? So we've got a lot of people refusing to address all of these problems that were brought up in this article. And you'll find it in my newsletter this week. It's a great little article. I'm quoting extensively from it here. But they're saying that people are actively suppressing, canceling, censoring, deplatforming any questions and discussions about these types of issues. It's just incredible. Bottom line is there will not be, there cannot be enough mines, metals, and minerals on the entire planet to reach any net zero U.S. economy by 2050, which is the Biden administration goal, much less a global green economy. Okay, now here's another issue. Remember Hurricane Ian that hit? People in Florida have electric cars, just like they do in other states. They're not, of course, not everybody's driving electric down there. But electric vehicles and backup lithium-ion batteries, which you need in order to provide your home with power if you're relying on solar panels, for instance. Well, there's some others, I get it, right? There's some new iron-type batteries and things. But as a rule, we're talking about backup lithium-ion batteries, particularly if you're getting those battery packs from our friends at Tesla. Well, both the vehicles and the battery modules for your backup power can erupt spontaneously into these chemical-fueled infernos. We have seen this happen already. And those infernos cannot be extinguished by conventional firefighting means. So this is a real problem, because we now need to treat every electric vehicle and every backup battery system as if it's loaded and ready to ignite. Never park an electric vehicle, install a power wall, or locate a backup power facility near anything you are not prepared to have destroyed. So that means don't park your electric car in your garage. Don't park it near other vehicles. In fact, we've had warnings from some manufacturers as they found defects in their battery packs. Some manufacturers saying, yeah, don't ever park the electric car in your garage. Bring it in. We'll fix it for you, right? Don't park them near other vehicles, in parking garages. Don't park your electric car under an apartment building, office buildings. Don't park them in residential neighborhoods, highway tunnels, or on cargo ships like the Felicity Ace. Okay? Be very, very careful because we are not ready for any of this yet. This is insanity. This is not science. Okay? So the Felicity Ace, in case you didn't know, was a cargo carrier. And it went down with thousands of Porsches and Volkswagens aboard. So obviously it's going to be bad news for any marine organisms in the area. Well, now we've got electric car batteries and tanks of oil and gas at the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, around 2 miles down, a couple hundred miles from the Azores. Portuguese Navy had to go out, and this was 2022, by the way, and break up a small oil patch at the surface of the water. But it's very, very concerning because these electric batteries are going to degrade. They have a lot of power in them. Have you ever noticed that the airlines will not let you on board with a large battery pack? So there's a maximum size of an external battery you can bring with you on the airline because of this very problem. They have caught fire before. It's just amazing. March 1st, 2022, the car carrier Felicity Ace sank below the waves near the Portuguese Azores archipelago. So they're worried about all the pollution and what's going to happen here. We've got lithium down there too, which is highly toxic. Frankly, the fuel isn't as bad. If you look at the Gulf of Mexico, the amount of oil that leaks naturally into the Gulf of Mexico, not including the big Exxon leaks there, and we could get into the causes of that too, but not including that, it leaks as much oil as that Exxon leak with all of those millions of barrels of oil. It's constantly leaking, but that oil is digested by certain microbes there in the Gulf of Mexico. In fact, that's how we're looking now, and we're cleaning up some of these different oil spills using those same microbes that are in the Gulf of Mexico. These microbes that love the raw oil, okay? But we're not ready. We're absolutely not ready. Remember, they have to remove 40 million tons of overlying rock just to reach the copper. Think about the lithium mining that has to happen and where it's happening. Think about the mining of nickel up in Quebec and how for miles around NASA uses that mine for testing space vehicles because there is nothing alive for all of those square miles. Yeah, how about the wonderful windmills? Dead birds, bats, other endangered species killed off from those things, right? We have to be reasonable. We have to be straightforward, okay? This is nuts, absolutely nuts. You know what I'm aiming for, which is a green future with the new nuclear. And I love for us to move even further along than even the new nuclear stuff. All right, we don't have time. I'm going to get into this romance stuff and BEC, the business email compromise. Mark Ruffalo got caught up in this couple of weeks or months ago, I guess. It's absolutely incredible. But let me bring this up. This is a flashback. People have been wondering what caused that Soviet-era pipeline to explode back in 82. Do you remember that? Ronald Reagan's administration. You might not be old enough to remember. But we had 3 deep-water explosions that destroyed the Nord Stream pipelines under the Baltic Sea. Do you remember that? Yeah, not very long ago. And the Swedish seismologists reported that one of the 3 explosions measured a 2.3 on the Richter scale. That's earthquake scale, okay? But it was no earthquake. It was an explosion. So let's go back to the days of Ronald Reagan. Turns out, back in 1982, the CIA sabotaged a Soviet pipeline in Siberia. U.S. software caused the explosion in the gas pipeline that was so large it could be seen from space and put the Soviet Union out of the gas and oil business for a little while. What happened to Nord Stream? CraigPeterson.com. Well, there's a little justice here. You know what BEC is, business email compromise, romance scamming. One of these guys were just sent to prison for 25 years. So that's a good thing, right? Well, we got a couple of scam articles to talk about here. Both of these, again, in the newsletter on Monday. This one's from Sophos, who is a cybersecurity company. And then we have another one about the scam involving Mark Ruffalo from Graham Cluley. And there's a few others out there. But those are the links I sent you guys on Monday, so you knew what was going on. We're talking right now about this guy named Elvis. What is this? Ojik Polar, I guess. He was just jailed for 25 years in Atlanta, Georgia, for running. I can't even say Georgia today. So he was jailed 25 years in Atlanta for running a cybercrime group that scammed close to $10 million in under 2 years from individuals and businesses caught up in so-called romance and business email compromise scams. BEC scams are huge right now. We're going to talk about what these things are. But there's 5 other co-conspirators who seem to have worked for Elvis, and they've already pled guilty in the case, and apparently they haven't been sentenced yet. So let's talk about what this is. Business email compromise is this kind of an umbrella term for online scams where the bad guys are trying to get access to something, right? So they start with trying to find email addresses, trying to get access to the email account inside a company so that they can now send emails as someone inside the company. And fraudulent emails they send don't just seem to come from the company they're attacking, but they actually do come from them. So they use a number of different methods to do that, and they're trying to manipulate you, right? So this is kind of a spear phishing attack where they're going after specific people. And I was on TV talking about this in one particular case where one of the hosts of the news program received an email. And that email said that they wanted, and it came from someone inside the TV station, said that they wanted to have a bit of a party. And they're trying to keep it quiet, but, they're going to have everybody there. And they wanted to give away gift cards to everybody that comes. So they asked him to go ahead and buy some of these gift cards. So sure enough, they called me because I've been on their station before talking about cybersecurity, and we played with them over a course of a couple of days. I was surprised how long we could scam the scammers, but they were definitely dedicated. And what they wanted to happen is they wanted me to go to Walmart or another local store and buy a bunch of Amazon gift cards, and then come back and give them the gift card numbers and scratch off that special, ID code on the back and give them that too. And I asked them, well, why would I do that? And they said, well, because we want to make sure everyone gets the cards. It was just completely nonsensical. I asked them a whole bunch of questions, like, why would we do this? Why would we give them the cards? Why don't we just blah, blah, blah. So I kind of strung them along for a while. I think they thought they had somebody on the hook, but they didn't. So that's the kind of scam at the low end we're talking about. On the high end, we got a call from a company that had, I think it was $80,000 that was stolen from them, basically. Again, another scam. You might be familiar with Barbara Corcoran. She is from Shark Tank, one of these investors, and she does a lot of real estate stuff. And her organization got scammed out of, what was it, $400,000, I think it was, because her bookkeeper / accountant had received this email asking for some money to be transferred in order to pay a vendor. That's usually, by the way, how that works. And Barbara was CC'd on the response, and she saw it right away and said, wait a minute, this isn't right. Called the bank and had it stopped. So she's lucky that wire didn't go through, because according to the FBI, once that money gets transferred, it takes them about 90 seconds to get it out of the reach of U.S. authorities. Now, sometimes it takes longer. There's a whole lot of mules that are used, people in the U.S. that have been scammed into, I need to move this money to my dying relative overseas, and I need a U.S. account. Have you seen any of those emails? It kind of reminds you a little bit of the Nigerian scams back in the day. Business email compromise, you might have already heard it called something like CEO fraud or CFO fraud. It's BEC is what it is, okay? So if they can get the CEO's email address or the CFO's, they're really cooking. And then here's another one. This is a lady over in Eastern Europe who made $45 million in the course of just a few days. It can all be done. We've got to be careful, because we don't want the bad guys to gain access to employees' real mailboxes, because it can cause all kinds of problems. So let's think about what's in your email. Do you have an account recovery for your email? So let's say the bad guy's in your email right now, and they're looking. They see, okay, Bank of America, let's just say. This isn't just a problem for Bank of America. This is a problem for any bank. But they're looking through. They find your bank. So they go to the bank site. They go to log in. They put in your email address, the one that they're already using, which might be your business email address. They might have gotten into let's say you have a Google email address or something else. So now they have that. They put in your email address at the bank's website, and they say, forgot password. What happens then? Is your bank going to send you a reset link to your email? Okay. They have access to your email account. They're going to get that reset link, and they're going to be able to wire money out. They can also, this one I know from, again, another client we picked up, because someone had got into their accounting records and they found all of the invoices they'd been sending out, and they changed the invoices to say the money needed to be transferred ACH'd to the bad guy's bank account and resent all of the invoices. So the people get the invoices, they say payment terms, okay, new account, no problem, we'll transfer it over there. They can find out while looking through your email when large payments are due, which suppliers or customers are involved. Okay? Or they can reply to worried colleagues who might ask, hey, is this real? Are we really going to have this party? Tell colleagues who are suspicious not to contact IT or security operations. Deleting fake emails from the sent folder so the genuine user never sees them. Matching the style of the genuine user by just copying and pasting stuff the real person, the genuine user, has been sending to other people from the sent box. Persuading the other party here that they're trying to con by using your email address to treat the request as confidential. Defrauding customers of the company. It goes on and off. That's how this guy made $10 million. It's crazy. So the Department of Justice here in their report said, at the trial, the jury heard from several businesses representing just a small sample of the total number of companies defrauded who had been victimized by spoof emails. In each case, the victim business believed it was making a payment, often several hundreds of thousands of dollars, to a long-standing vendor, only to subsequently learn that they'd been tricked into sending the money to an account controlled by Elvis and thereby defrauded. Now, romance scams are really sad. Obviously, businessman, people lose their businesses over stuff like this. All the cash out of your operating account, are you kidding? In fact, that one company that I mentioned earlier that had the $80,000 taken from their operating account, they went so far as to go over to China, actually it was Hong Kong, to file a police report. More money's been stolen. Of course, they're not getting a dime back, never did. So a romance scam is targeting individuals rather than companies, but they can still be very lucrative. Remember I mentioned Mark Ruffalo here earlier? This is the guy who played the Hulk. Well, here we go. Fraudsters are now pretending to be Jason Statham as well. I really like him, right? Incredible Hulk actor Mark Ruffalo. Here's a case where this manga artist, I had to look that up. It's a Japanese style of artistry. Chike ID, I guess is how you pronounce it, received an unsolicited message via Facebook from somebody claiming to be Ruffalo. With help from some translation software, an initially skeptic ID responded to the Hollywood actor attaching a photo of herself. Flattered by phony Ruffalo's response, she shared details of her private life and personal struggles. Mark Ruffalo's response? I will never make you feel sad. So an American friend of hers questioned whether the person claiming to be Ruffalo was genuine, noting that whoever was responding to her wrote like somebody who doesn't speak English. And then she received a 30-second video call that blew away any of the suspicions she had left. She said, I'm sure it was Mark himself who was behind the screen chatting with me. It was a deep fake video. Her romantic feelings towards this imposter intensified as she was talking to him, and the couple ended up marrying online. So the fake Ruffalo began to complain of financial problems, asked her to wire $1,000 for a plane ticket. Each time, the supposed Ruffalo promised to pay her back, asking for more and more money. She ended up giving him over $500,000, and no, she never met the man who had defrauded her out of $500,000. Isn't that something? Be careful out there. Make sure you get my newsletter. This was in this week's newsletter. Protect yourself, protect your family, protect your business. CraigPeterson.com. Take care, guys.